Good afternoon, everyone. This is the state of the bird for the first quarter of 2022. Subtitled this time with IRC what you did there. That'll make a bit more sense later. Just a quick reminder, this is not a normal stream. I won't be interacting with chat directly. If you have a question, please type !ask, and it'll go into a queue, which we will answer at a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. All right, let's get going. So, what is the state of the bird? Kind of already covered that, but it's a presentation explaining what's going on in the project. One of the things is with the development of Pidgin 3 taking so long, it's very easy for people to think nothing's happening. And to try to correct that, we do the state of the birds to try to, give people a good synopsis of what's going on, because there's a lot of stuff going on. It's just not exactly obvious, or it isn't clear. And like like, why are you working on this? It's like, because this is required like 4 steps later to make something else happen. But yeah, so but on top of all that, it's an interactive presentation for the community. Like I mentioned, people can go ahead and type !ask and then their question, and they can interact with me. I don't know if anyone else is here from the project, and we can just talk about future, that kind of stuff, whatever. So all right, anyways, moving on. But first, we're gonna start by retrospective. So what happened this past quarter, the quarter being January 1st through March 30th. So our last day of the bird was January 20th. And our next one's tentatively scheduled for July 21st. I typically put the tentative date as the first Thursday of the month after the quarter. We never make it that way. It always tends to be the third one. So I'm just putting that as the third now. So that's the deal. All right, so this time we have some metrics. Yeah. So review request. I forgot that I was going to put in how many contributors we had for each quarter. And I was going to try to get that in today, but I just ran out of time. So anyways, as you can see in the fourth quarter of 2021, actually I should have reversed these. Oh well. Learn lessons for next time. So in the previous quarter, we had 239 open pull request or review requests, or pull requests, whatever you want to call them. In the first quarter of 2022, we only had 164. I say only, we just got more done, right? Like we've been tackling harder issues. We'll get into that more, and that's why our numbers are down. But we closed 235 in the fourth quarter of 2021, and we closed 153. So in Q4 2021, we netted 4, and in Q1 we netted 11, right? A positive 11, right? So we have 11 outstanding that didn't get closed that were open this quarter, or were open during this quarter. So that's still a ton of pull requests, ton of stuff happening. So yeah. All right, next up, issues. Oh, and I should have. Okay, sorry, I didn't dry run this exactly. I kind of wrote it the other night, and I should have dry run it, but I didn't. So issues. This is our issue tracker that can be found at issues.iamfreedom.org. In Q4 2021, we had 27 open issues. Q1 2022, we have had 32 open issues. In Q4, we closed 9 issues. In Q1, we closed 125. Ooh, I should have put that in here too. Okay. We still have something like 13,000 open issues. Or, no, 1,300. Sorry, it's a big difference. We have 1,300 open issues yet. So basically, when you see a big burst of closed issues, that's that we're going through and we're triaging stuff and getting rid of stuff that's like either not applicable anymore, or there's not enough information to be able to do anything, and it's like 10 years old or something like that, right? So that's where a lot of these issues of the 125 come from. It was stuff like somebody got a crash in 2009 and we don't know who they are. We don't know how to get a hold of them. All right, close the bug. Right, it's one of those. All right, so for commits, so Q4 Pidgin 2 saw 6 commits. For Q1 Pidgin 2 saw 4 commits. I know those numbers sound low, but it is the 3rd, 4th week of April now, and there was a lot of stuff that happened on Pidgin 2 in April. But again, we'll get to that in a minute. So for Pidgin 3 though, Q4 we saw 165 commits. In Q1 we saw 100. For Q4, or for G plugin, we saw 54 in Q4. That was as we were transitioning G plugin to GTK4. And then in Q1 we had 10 commits. That was cleaning up some of the GTK4 stuff, that kind of stuff. Oh, I thought Talkatoo had more. All right, but Talkatoo, we also converted to GTK 4. So a little work there, but not a whole lot. So 8 commits in Q4 and 4 commits in Q1. So, all right. So progress is happening. It's moving. I mean, that's still 128 commits in a quarter. That's uh, it's mostly me, QLogic, and others. So 128 commits across 2 people with occasional other people. That's not bad. That's not bad for a quarter. So yeah. All right, infrastructure. I knew I said I wasn't going to put this on the slide this quarter, but I email is still running at. We did get some work done on the email. It just every time I try to get back to it, I spend an hour or so remembering where I was on it, and then something else comes up and I have to go work on it. And then by the time I get back to the email, the same thing happens again, just rinse and repeat. Yeah, I know I lied. And so the big thing right now is that I remember is we need to figure out what we're going to do with authentication for Mailman. We were trying to tie it into our hub instance, our single sign-on, but they're like the software that the Mailman web interface uses. You can't just like put in an arbitrary OAuth provider. You have to have like a special Python library or something, and it's just like, do we do that or do we just not care? Or do we just let people manage it in Mailman? And that's where we are right now. We're probably just going to let people manage it in Mailman and get it going and get it done. It just that decision needs to be made and needs to be finalized. But again, I need to sit back down, figure out exactly where it is because there might be something else I don't recall exactly. So yeah, that's the deal. All right, next. So for Pidgin 2, today we are releasing 2.14.9. Like I said earlier, I'm running a little bit behind today, so I don't have the tarballs and everything built. But after this presentation, I will go and get that done. So be sure to check the website or Discord or whatever. There will be announcements everywhere. Everything's ready to go. The last thing that had to be done was the blog post had to be proofread, which I believe Reconaro did earlier this morning. And then I had one last update to the change log that just bump the version. Once that's done and merged, we can go ahead and cut the release and go. But some of the few fun things that are added to 2.14.9 are we finally added rate limiting to IRC. That means you can no longer excess flood. Excess flooding is when you just put a ton of or like say you copy like this entire slide and paste it into IRC. You're probably going to excess flood. So IRC networks are very happy that we are landing this, especially Libera. I've been working with them quite a bit to get this done. In fact, the default rate limiting settings come from the IRC operators on Libera. So that's good stuff. We ran into an issue with authentication at startup, so we had to work around that. But that was silly because we shouldn't have rate limited until we're actually like logged on, and that's the case now. There's a better way to do it, but what we did worked. So that's fine. On top of that, we finally fixed the downloads for the spell checking dictionaries in the Windows installer. Some of you may recall that has been an issue for. Ooh, I became aware of it probably 2 years ago. And it required rewriting how that part of our installer works, and our installer is in the null software installer system, which if you have ever written NSYS scripts, you'll understand why I let it sit for 2 years. But on top of that, I think it's been broken for 10 years. I don't remember exactly. We were down the way it was originally set up was to download dictionaries from Open Office's SourceForge repository or something. I don't remember. What we ended up doing instead was we have a CI build that we can trigger. It's a manual build that will run a container, a Debian container that will install all the dictionaries and then repackages them so we can redistribute them. And then we're in control of those downloads now. So if they break, we can fix it easier. We don't have to reinvent the entire thing like we had to do this time. So that's good. All right. We also fixed an issue for IRC transfers on Windows. There was a silly bug that just made them not work. in certain conditions. I don't remember exactly what the conditions were, but they just didn't work in those conditions. We also fixed the context menus for conversations with non-buddies. A while ago, I want to say it was 2.13. It might have been earlier in 2.14. Um, we replaced this concept of transient buddies. That's people that aren't on your contact list, but that you're talking to, stuff like that. And when we replaced those, that broke context menus in like IRC, where you could right click on a name and like get info and stuff like that. So adding this back fixes that problem. Um, so then we believe we have mostly fixed the UI freezing when entering input. This typically was seen at when you would put a link into the input box and then you would edit text around it, and all of a sudden Pidgin just stops responding. We think we've gotten all of the cases, but we don't know because there's been so many instances of this over the years, and I mean years. I think the earliest issue on this might even be before 2010. Been a long time here. And our solution's not great, but it works. So yeah. But so like, the reason we're not saying we fixed it is, and it says mostly fixed, is we don't know we got every case. I think this closed something like 10 bugs in the issue tracker alone with this one. So yeah. All right, there was another issue with IRC file transfers where they would fail at 99%. This was a silly programming error that has been addressed and taken care of. So that's cool. We fixed the XMPP attention messages being sent to the wrong Jabber ID or ID. I don't know why they didn't change it to Zid. Whatever, that's another story. It got called JID because it used to be called Jabber. The Jabber name got sold, so it's just XMPP. But everybody still recalls it a JID. I don't know. Excuse me. So I was actually surprised that somebody wanted this because the attention stuff is kind of silly. And actually I removed it from Pidgin 3 a while ago. So we're gonna find out if we need to add it back at some point. The attention stuff is like, you're trying to get some, like, if you want to like make sure you can get somebody's attention, there's this separate mechanism called the attention API. It used to be nudges on MSN, buzzes on Yahoo. XMPP has attention plus buzz or something. I forget. There's like 3 standards for it. And like it shakes a window, plays a different sound, something like that, to actually like try to get somebody's attention rather than just playing a normal message receive sound or something like that. All right, we defaulted the real name and ident name to the username or the nickname for IRC. This has been a big one. A long time ago, for whatever reason, somebody thought it was a good idea to use. So the ident protocol for IRC was created 20 plus years ago, easy. And the idea was that, the idea was that people couldn't be necessarily anonymous on IRC. So like, you would be able to like ban them because their ident had to be correct or something like that, right? So like you'd have to have an ident server, stuff like that. Ident is actually a Unix service. It's been around forever. It's no longer recommended or used because it's black or whatever, it leaks personal info, stuff like that. So what we did at one point when ident servers became not really a thing anymore is we went ahead and for some reason decided to use the local user's account name as the ident name, right? So like on my machine, my computer name is Grim, but if I joined on IRC and my name was Gary, my ident would show as Grim, right? So now instead of that, we just use the nickname, right? So if I connect with Grim, it defaults to Grim, but you also now have a field for it. I think no, you had a field before for it in the advanced account options for IRC accounts, but it would default to your operating system username, not to your IRC username. It's now defaults to the IRC user. So if you didn't have it set before, now your ident will just magically change. Yeah. So all right. We also finally added a advanced IRC option for SASL login names. So with SASL is an authentication mechanism. This is how a lot of IRC networks let you connect with, or have you authorize yourself when you connect to identify to NIC serve, stuff like that. One of the problems here is IRC, since you can't have multiple logins to the same username, if like you get disconnected and you reconnect before the other one got disconnected, right before the server noticed the connection was gone, what'll happen is your IRC nickname will go to your alternate nickname, and then we used to try to use that for your Sassel login, which will fail, and then you'd get disconnected. Um, because you'd fail authentication because it's not the right name. A lot of IRC networks, even if you have your Nix group together, they require that your Sassel login name be your primary. So by adding that option, you can now set that. It's always your primary. You're good to go. So, all right. Then we also removed the XMPP Connect DNS lookup for connecting to IRC servers. This is basically an ill-advised XMPP connection method because unless you're using DNS spec, it's trivial to man in the mirror, which then means, you know, like if I'm on the LAN with you, I can just send you a DHC or DNS response. I said response, right? Because it doesn't care. I can send you a DNS response to poison your DNS, and then next time you reconnect to your XMPP server, that poison DNS packet will then trick Pidgin into connecting to my server. So this is actually a security issue. It's a security issue, but it's not really severe because it's been known for so long and we just didn't realize it was still in our code. But we do have a CVE number for it. As far as I know, like almost nobody's actually using it. Yeah, so it's removed now, so it's no longer an issue. But so that's Pidgin 2.14.9. There's one other thing that's didn't make it into the slide is we finally updated the translations. We haven't ran with updated translations since like 2.14.2, I think, somewhere around there is the last time we updated translations. And yeah, that's just on me. It's a pain in the butt, which is why I haven't done it. So yeah. All right. So Pidgin 3, where do we get with that? We finished converting Talkatoo to GTK4, and we have started converting Pidgin to GTK4. I didn't put the numbers in here, but we're currently sitting at something like 29 failed files, 280 some odd warnings, and like 600 errors or something. That's not surprising. We'll get to that in a little bit more here, or in a little bit later. Whenever you change the toolkit, you know, it's gonna take time, especially when there's not backwards compatibility, or when backwards compatibility is broken and you haven't kept up on the deprecated APIs and the current standards, it's gonna be a bad time, right? So that's one of the things we've been trying to work on and going forward. Didn't mention it in here, but I should have. But like, so at some point in Pidgin 3, we added a hard dependency on libsoup. Libsoup is an HTTP library, which is actually a dependency of one of our dependencies. So it was already in our dependency tree. So it just made sense to start using it ourselves rather than having our own HTTP library. But for example, libsoup 3 just came out like 2 months ago, and we're already working on getting porting to that, right? Because we don't want to be stuck in the situation where we were with GTK4 or with GTK 3 or 4 even, right? And one of the benefits of, like, a lot of people are like, well, the distros don't have it. Okay, is for those of you that don't know, we're not targeting LTSs anymore, long-term support releases. We just don't care. We're not targeting them. And the reason for that is what we'll be doing once we finish getting to GTK4 is we'll be providing an app image as well as, or most likely, a Flatpak, maybe a snap if we need to, right? But then on the Windows and Mac side, we'll have our own installers and stuff like that. So like the LTS distro users, like they won't have to wait for a Pidgin release to come out and then their distribution to package it. They'll just be able to download the Flatpak or app image, or if we do a snap, and they could just run that, right? So like our requirement for distro-based dependencies goes away, right? So us being able to target and keep up to date with our dependencies, it will be a much better thing. So yeah. All right. Next up, we removed Farstream. So Farstream was/is, I say was because as far as I know, it's not super maintained. A multimedia library built on top of GStreamer to its original intent and purpose, as I recall, although I'm not super well versed in it, was to make it easier to handle stuff like voice and video stuff for instant message clients. Unfortunately, last I knew, what it was targeting was like Yahoo and MSN, both of which are dead now. So what we've been doing is we have been building a new media API that if you know anybody that is well versed in GStreamer, please reach out to me because I am struggling. So we have a concept for a new media API that we're trying to build a full proof of concept for. We know the basic idea of it works, but we're trying to build it out in a standalone option to make sure it works. And I'm struggling with it. That's been something I've been working on for like 2 or 3 weeks now on stream. Um, is me banging my head against my desk going, I don't understand GStreamer. Like it's not that I don't understand it, but like I'm missing a certain sophistication when it comes to it, right? That's what it comes down to. But so our new media API, it's just going to be GStreamer. It's not going to be optional. So GStreamer itself won't be optional, but the protocol plugins and the UIs will gracefully handle if their plugins are not there. So what that means is we don't have super complicated builds anymore where distributions are put in horrible places, right? Um, so for example, like if somebody wanted to use Biddleby libpurple, that's a Biddleby is a IRC to all their chat network gateway. And there's a libpurple plugin so you can talk to anything that libpurple does. So if you wanted to talk to that and you're on like some tiny VPS or something, you'd have to get GStreamer and all of its you don't want GStreamer because you have minimal disk space or whatever. Maybe you're like have a shell account somewhere, right? Like you don't own the machine, you just have a shell. So what would happen is people were not happy that they would have to install GStreamer plus all the dependencies, yada yada. What'll happen here is in my testing, at least on Debian, just depending on the libstreamer library, adds about 5 megs to the executable. Now that 5 megs is paying for a ton of complexity that we have in the code. So like there's currently in the current media API, there's all these stubs and preprocessor stuff to work around whether or not we don't have GStreamer. So like if you don't have GStreamer, we create a fake media object and we use that to make the API complete and basically do a no operation and stuff like that. And then if you do have GStreamer, we have this other code path that's based on preprocessor stuff, and that works. But then again, you run into the issue where somebody who's using like Biddleby with Biddleby libpurple, they would have to build their own libpurple because the distribution's not going to turn it off because then it stops the Pidgin user from being able to use it, right? So by depending on GStreamer directly and gracefully handling lack of plugins, everybody wins, right? So we add a 5 meg dependency. The Biddleby libpurple people, they don't have to care. They've got 5 extra megs. Sorry, but it's better than 300 megs when you pull in GStreamer plugins good and bad. Those are the package names. They have their plugins are the good, the bad, and the ugly. And ugly most people don't use, but like bad is like testing plugins or like unstable. Good is stable, and then ugly is like watch out. Like will cause crashes most likely. But GStreamer handles all that gracefully for us. So there's no reason that we should have to do that. So like the media API we have in place right now, like it handles codecs and all sorts of other fun stuff and crap like that, and different devices and all that. There's no need. GStreamer has all of that built in for us. We don't have to do it. So that's a bonus right there. So, all right. The other big thing for Pidgin 3 is that we've now migrated to the automatic application menus that work properly in Mac OS. Ubuntu's Unity, which isn't really used anymore. I think there might be another Linux manager. As well as Mac OS, they have their own custom menu bar stuff, right? That's not part of an application window. And then Mac and Unity both have an application itself menu. So there's the main menu bar, and then there's the application menu. So like on Mac OS, like you would see a menu at the top that says Pidgin, and then you would have like buddy list, contacts, blah blah blah, whatever, right? So that Pidgin menu is the application menu, and then the rest of it is a menu bar. But since we finally migrated to the GTK3 API that did that, which we have to move to GTK4, we now get better integration with Mac OS. So that's very cool. That's something we haven't had forever. And the Mac OS stuff doesn't run great yet. I mean, Pidgin 3 itself is still super buggy and not really ready for anybody to use. But it does work a lot better with it. So, all right, next up, what were our setbacks? So, our number one issue is that converting GTK2 code that's masquerading as GTK3 code takes forever to convert to code. Well, let that sink in for a minute. So, what I mean by that is, as I talked about earlier, we have a lot of API that we were using that was deprecated a long time ago, GTK3, that we didn't fix and move to the newer stuff, right? So like the menu bar stuff, all of our current menu bar stuff has been the GTK2 stuff that's been deprecated. We're almost through all of it. We're stuck right now in some of the dynamic menus. We're trying to figure out the best way to do it. We've gone through a couple iterations actually. But so like to get to GTK4, we have to we have to replace what was deprecated to get to the move to GTK4 or to GTK3 to make it not deprecated, and then back up. Some of the dynamic menus we converted to like be a GTK menu that was GTK widget that would or GTK menu subclass that would manage itself and then just handle its dynamic updates and stuff like that. And that was great. That got rid of the deprecated code in GTK3. But the problem is in GTK4, GTK menu and GTK menu item don't exist. So we've had to go through another iteration and figure out how to work that in with G menu model and stuff like that. We've got some pretty good ways to do it right now, but we're still struggling with a few parts. But there's other things like that that are all over the place. And like we have a lot of usage of GTK listbox or tree view rather. And I know the consensus right now for GTK4 is to move to GTK listbox, and that's fine, but like we're not going to do that yet because there's no sense in converting to new widgets and stuff in GTK3 when we're going to have to, when the look and feel and everything will change in GTK4 when we move to those widgets anyways. So let's make it so we can move to GTK4 and then let's do the redesign and relayout once, right? That's kind of where we are. So, all right, but yeah, that's some of the big stuff with GTK4. So, all right. Aside from that, we still have some work to do with Google OSS Fuzz. This is mostly just updating the Google OSS Fuzz repo for how they run their fuzzer against us, stuff like that. This has been on my plate for a while. I just honestly keep forgetting about it. I think I have most of it committed, but not pull requested, which means I'm going to need to rebase and probably fix a bunch of stuff. And I just need to sit down and get it done. It's not a super high priority to me because not a whole lot has changed in Pidgin 2 over the past 10 years, right? So if somebody's fuzzing it, they've probably found a bunch of issues. But we'll get there, and at some point we'll get it done. So, all right, aside from that, other setback is the email just still hasn't gotten done yet. Like I said earlier, I sit down to get it done. I've got to spin up, figure out where I was, and then something else comes up. So I just got to block out some time, make it happen. Likewise, I haven't been able to dedicate as much time as I'd like to working on Pidgin, other obligations, contract work, stuff around the house, all that. A lot of that's been cutting into my Pidgin time. So it's unfortunate, but that is the way it is. So, all right, next up. What are we going to do next? So, sip of tea here. So next steps. This is what we'll be working on between now and the next State of the Bird, which again is tentatively scheduled for, what did I say, July 21st, I believe. So we're going to continue the convergence of the contact list and the conversation window. The big blockers here are the menus. So right now we're trying to get the menus done to get that done. And then we need to convert the contact list into an actual full-fledged or widget. Right now, it's still a custom data structure that contains widgets rather than a widget. So we'll have to do that, and that's going to be a pain in the butt. So we're going to continue porting to GTK 4. I would absolutely love to have the GTK 4 port building successfully by the next State of the Bird. I'm optimistic, but I wouldn't bet on it, right? Like most things in the Pidgin world, as we start moving stuff and start getting there, we start finding bigger problems that that are hiding in the shadows, that kind of stuff. And um, I lost my train of thought. um, but so like right now we have, like I said, we have like something like 600 errors or something in the GTK4 build. And lots of those errors mask lots of other things. And once we start fixing those errors, we start finding other problems, right? So it's very difficult to try to um, get a real feel for how long it's going to take, because you fix one thing and you find out that that was hiding that 4 other things were broke, right? And it kind of grows at an exponential scale, or potentially an exponential scale. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But we're getting there. And then finally, for real this time, get the email to his new home on DigitalOcean. I'm probably going to block out some time at the beginning of next month to get this done. I think that's the only way it's going to happen, right? So if it means I got to skip a stream or something, I'm going to skip a stream or something to get it done. So, yeah. All right. So now it is time for the question. Here, that, and then that. So our first question is, does this pop up? Yep. So is there any way I can configure Pidgin to automatically identify to NixServe servers? So the IRC helper plugin will generally help you there. Um, somebody wants to put a link to it. Otherwise, I can get it to you shortly. That's its main purpose is, and that's the main way we do it. The issue with Nixer, so there's there's a feature I would have loved to have added to 2.14.9 for IRC, but unfortunately we don't have a UI way to do it, which sucks. What we need is an account option that can do multi-line text fields. And then what I want to do is have IRC connect commands, so that once you are connected and authenticated, but before we do anything else, you can run X command or run these commands, right? So like if you're an IRC operator, you can do your operator password stuff there. You can set user modes, and just it gives you a free form drop in these commands, right? And that would work for NixServe. However, NixServe isn't static, right? None of the other services are. So what ends up happening is if you connect and NixServe is down, and then there's multiple scenarios, right? So if you connect and NixServe is down, your command's not going to work. If NixServe goes down and they had to restart it and it doesn't know who's who anymore, and when it comes back up, you need to know that, so that when the message comes and do all that, there's a lot of dynamic stuff there. That's what IRC helper tries to handle, right? So like if it's I believe IRC helper will check for messages from NixServe on networks, and if it gets it and says the right things, then it'll go ahead and do the identification. Putting that into Pidgin itself, I'm not opposed to it, but it's not going to be a Pidgin 2 thing. At least it's not going to come from me for Pidgin 2. And it's tricky, right? Because there's so many different IRC server softwares, there's so many different services packages that trying to make it work right kind of sucks. What more of the IRC networks are doing now is they use a SASL login so that you authenticate at that point. And that just helps, or that just alleviates the problem, right? Because part of your login is just, that's your Nixer. So yeah. All right, hope that answered your question. If not, please feel free to run the ask command and go again, or not follow up. So, all right, next up, we've got, can Pidgin be used to show Twitch chat? So yes, in a iffy way. Yes, in a barely tested way. um, so Twitch chat, you can use any IRC client to connect to it, um, including Pidgin. Um, but because Twitch chat is not full blown IRC, they implement a very specific subset of IRC, and they don't implement a lot of stuff that Pidgin uses. You'll end up getting spammed with like text boxes and stuff like that, or with notification dialogues and stuff like that. So you can do it. There is a plugin on our plugin site. Actually, we don't just have a regular plugins list, do we? No. Anyway, so if you go to pidgin.im/plugins, there's a plugin you can search for in there called No IRC or No Who IRC or No Who or IRC No Who. I don't remember what it is. And you can install that plugin, and that will make Twitch chat much easier to deal with. On top of that, I have an extremely early proof of concept plugin that's not listed on the website, but if you want, either whisper me on here or something. If you're willing to build it and understand that it might crash Pidgin because it's not very thoroughly tested, I do have a Twitch protocol plugin that is built. It works, but it's not stable. It's not like actively being developed. I put it together a while ago, and I'm kind of waiting. The idea is that the main idea for the Twitch protocol plugin right now is that it'll help me figure out how to do one-way voice and video, right? So like you'll be able to have Twitch chat and ideally see a stream at the same time. I know Twitch is like you have to use their embedded browser. The primary reason for that is to show ads. I have no problem as a Twitch streamer, right? I have no problem with Twitch displaying ads during a stream because I am a streamer and I understand how that's how they stay alive, and that's also I get revenue share for that, stuff like that, right? I understand users don't necessarily want to see that, but that's what subscriptions are for. That's what Twitch Turbo is for, right? There's other ways around that, right? Rather than just disabling it and breaking their terms of service and stuff. But so like I've got to try to figure that out to see if that's even possible. But that's the idea. That's a whole one-way communication, right? So you would have a call, but there's no client side for it, that kind of stuff. And that'll help me design the API, stuff like that. That's the main reason I started building it. So yeah. All right. Hopefully that answers your question. Again, if you have any other follow-up questions, please type ask again and we can go from there. Next question. He says, so Pidgin 3 runs on every target platform. So currently it runs on Windows, Mac, and Linux and BSD. I actually just saw something that creates like an X layer, X11 or Xorg layer on IQ OS, so it might even run there. But Pidgin 3 is designed and intended to run on Windows, Mac, Linux, BSD, whatever. We will be providing, so when we get there, right, we will be providing binaries for Windows, Mac, and Linux. The Linux versions are going to be Flatpaks and or app images. We'll probably do both. Although somebody on FlatHub will probably manage like a stable release, and we'll probably have like a dev release or something. But the idea is, one of the things that has stopped one of the things that has made us providing binaries difficult in the past is specifically Windows. You have to carry your own dependencies. And likewise on Mac, you run into issues depending on the package manager you're using. Actually, regardless of the package manager, you run into different issues. So like right now, we're doing our build testing on Mac with Homebrew. And like if you're gonna do Pidgin development on Homebrew right now, I have to give you a script to build it. Like you could sit there and figure it out like I did. Or you can use my script that sets up all of the package config path environment variables, the path environment variables, and I forget what else. And then you can run Meson with a million configuration options to make it build. Or you can use my script. But once we get to, so one of the big reasons we're moving to GTK4, aside from the fact that, you know, it's the modern tech, is back in 2017, 5 years ago, when Mason, the build system, basically started getting stable, we jumped on it pretty quick. Unbeknownst to us at the time, Mason was going to add a feature called subprojects. What the subprojects do is, if you've ever used subrepositories in your version control, it's similar but vastly different. What it does is a subproject can be in Git, it can be in Mercurial, it can be a tarball, it can be another directory in the project, whatever, right? And what it'll do is it'll pull that project from wherever its source is and build it as part of your build system. So by default, it was just Mason, only Mason itself Mason could only run Mason subprojects itself. There's now experimental support for, actually, no, I don't think it's experimental anymore. I think it's kind of in testing stage, support for building CMake subprojects. And there is experimental support for building auto tools projects. Now, one of the other things that's cooler on top of that is you can also provide and apply patches to the source code before it builds it. But anyways, so what we can do is, one of the big problems on the Windows side of building Pidgin is we've always had to get all of our dependencies and have this. We call it a Windows 32 dev directory. Now it'll be Windows 64, but whatever, right? And that would have all of our dependencies. And one of the reasons why Pidgin 2 is stuck on GTK 2.16 and glib 2.16 is we don't know how to rebuild our dev directory, because the scripts that built it are lost. The places where we got them don't exist anymore. The exact combination of getting the software right is an enormous time sink, and it's honestly just not worth it, right? So the benefit here is with the Mason subprojects, and we have proof of concept this on both Windows and Mac, is we can, from a Mason project, we can build GStreamer and GTK from scratch with just Mason and a compiler. So what's going to happen for the Windows stuff is it's going to suck to do the full Windows build. But when we'll get, I'll touch on that in a second. But what you'll be able to do is you will be able to build every single piece of Pidgin from one build command. And what that means is we are controlling all of our dependencies across all of our major platforms, right? So on Windows, Mac, and Linux, we will be using the same version of GTK, the same version of everything across all of it. And we can just build it from single build. You're probably like, wow, that's probably a ton of stuff, right? Yes. Surprisingly, it's not going to take as long as WebKit. We don't build WebKit, and WebKit, I still don't understand how that build takes 14 hours. On my machine, it takes about 15 to 17 minutes, but the wall time, that's spread across all my cores. The wall time is 14 hours. But it takes 15 minutes on a second gen Threadripper. That's insane. But Mason also has, so for those of you that don't know, there's a program out there that's very old called Ccache. And what it does is, so when you're compiling C code, the first thing is the code gets compiled into a non-platform specific object file, right? That's what a .o file is. And then when you link your program, you take all those O files and you convert them into the, you link them together and you convert them into the machine specific code. So there's a new version, or there's a new, I want to say version because it's not Ccache. I think it's SCcache. I don't remember. I have to look. But it's a modern day replacement for Ccache, right? So Ccache is great locally, but SCcache, or whatever it's called, is a version of Ccache that instead of caching on your local disk, it caches to S3. So what we can do is, to help people that are building Pidgin on Windows or whatever, and to help other contributors, right, is we can have our build agents share a cache directory, or like we can do, like, every time we do a commit or whatever, we can update the cache directory for the current source code up in a Minio instance or any S3 compatible instance, right? And then we can configure Mason to pull from that, right? So like, even if you're building our entire stack and there's like 3,000 objects that need to be built, you can pull the non-machine specific ones down from Minio, and you'll save a ton of time. So that's something we're going to look at soon, but we're not quite there yet. So that's the idea. All right, but yeah, hopefully that covers it. Like the getting to that point is going to take some time, but this is why GTK 4 is important right now. Because once we get to GTK 4, we can start doing all of that stuff, right? We've already, like I said, we've already done a proof of concept where I created a Meson project that pulled in GTK 4 as a sub project and built that on Windows and Mac with just a compiler and Meson. And I've done the same thing with GStreamer as well. So those are our big issues. And like I'm sure we'll run into issues with another dependency or something, but that's the idea. So, all right. Next up, when can he chat? Jakku asks, when can I chat with Final Fantasy 11 players using Pidgin? When you write the protocol plugin. I mean, honestly, if you know the API for it, you can probably knock it out pretty quick. Not too bad. I mean, okay. So for those of you that don't know, Pidgin itself, like we, the plugin and architect allows people to do all sorts of crazy things with Pidgin. There have been Twitter plugins, which are a little interesting, right? So like Twitter DMs makes sense, right? But people will also set it up so that you can get feeds, right? You can see all the like I don't know which ones do it right now, but like so when you connect to a Twitter protocol when you add your Twitter account with the Twitter protocol plugin, you see all of your follows in the buddy list. You get DMs the normal ways. That actually I don't know how the DMs work differently than the flies do. But I think one of them you just open the conversation window to them, and that's a reply. Actually, no, that can't work. That's got to be a chat. It's got to be a chat. I don't know. I gotta look. It's been a long time. But so there's also crazier stuff. Like there is a Docker protocol plugin. So Docker, the container runtime. Somebody was. I I actually talked to them recently. It was a silly, crazy idea, but they made it work. So what happens is there's a Docker protocol plugin that will talk to your local Docker daemon, and it'll show all of your current. I think it's all of your containers. It might not just be the running ones. The running ones would be online, right? The ones that aren't running would just be offline. It shows them in your buddy list, and then when you open a conversation to them, the standard output of the container goes to the history window. That's them sending you messages, and anything you type in the input box goes to standard input. And voila. So you can have a shell, or you can have a Docker container that's running bash, and you can be interacting with it via Pidgin. So yeah, you can do basically anything. Likewise, there is a RSS protocol plugin that you add contacts. When you add contacts, you just add them as a feed. When a new message comes in on the RSS subscription, it drops in as a new conversation. There's them sending you a message, that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's all sorts of crazy stuff that can happen. And it's just a matter of somebody writing a protocol plugin for it, right? Which yeah, we can probably mention this now. So for example, I don't know how many of you know him, but Ian Robb has been working with the project for a very, very long time. But his primary focus is writing protocol plugins. He very much enjoys reverse engineering stuff and then just making it work in Pidgin, which is great. So he's done stuff like our Discord protocol plugin. I almost said Slack. He hasn't done Slack. He's done ICQ, ICEY, or ICYQUE, ICQ. That's the ICQ JSON-based 2017 protocol, not the old Oscar one. What else has he done? He's done Skype. I think he did one of the original Skypes, and he also did Skype for web. So the Skype web stuff, he's done that. What else has he done? There's a ton of them, and I'm blanking on the other ones right now. But anyways, the reason I mention all this is he has finally gotten his Microsoft Teams protocol plugin enough to a point where he's announced it to the world, right? Oh, he did Rocket Chat too. Oh, and Mattermost. He also did Mattermost. And he's still done more. And I can't think of, he did an OkCupid protocol a long time ago. Yeah, he's done a lot of it, and he has tons of fun doing it. So but yeah, so he has a Microsoft Teams protocol plugin, which is already on the plugins list. So if you go to uh, pigeon.im, or no, what? If you go to pigeon.im/plugins and you search for Teams, it'll work. Why didn't the trigger work? Whatever. Whatever. Pigeon.im/plugins. You can find it. Um, so yeah, we just added that to the website. Was it last night or two? Remember? But yeah, so if you are stuck using Microsoft Teams and you want to use it in Pidgin, you can try it out now. Keep in mind, Pidgin 2 cannot actually do a lot of the things that modern chat does. One of the other reasons why we need to get Pidgin 3 moving and out the door is so we can do stuff like message attachments, reactions, edits, receipts, delivery receipts, better end-to-end encryption integration, blah, 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 right? I'll touch base on this real quick. But the reason we can't do any of that in Pidgin 2 is Pidgin 2's entire paradigm is based on AIM, right? AIM, IRC, Yahoo, MSN, all of them. I mean, it's really, really based on AIM, but all the other ones fit that mold too. And the problem is, back then when a message came in, you just displayed it. There was no edit feature, there was no reactions, there was no read receipts, right? So you just displayed it and maybe you saved it to disk. Long time ago now, messages became objects, right? They had IDs, they have read receipts, reactions, attachments, and so on, right? The problem is for us to make those changes now in Pidgin 2, we have to change the API drastically. By changing the API at all, right? As long as we do additive changes to the API, we don't have to change the major version number. Once we actually change the parameters of a function or delete something or something, we have to bump the major version number, right? That's how library versioning works. So, like, to be able to add any of those features into Pidgin 2, aside from the fact that this is what Pidgin 3 has been designed for forever, is we would have to, that would make Pidgin 2 become Pidgin 3 and Pidgin 3 would become Pidgin 4. And we don't want to do that for a number of reasons. Because number one, I know it's sunk time fallacy and all that stuff, but we already have 14 years into Pidgin 3, but we're actually getting close. Like we can see the light, right? There's a faint light at the end of the tunnel now where we're just in darkness. But yeah, so that's where we are now. So, all right, next up, we have a roadmap for the future of Pidgin, just to update delays, JTK streamline, and bug fixes. So the problem with roadmaps is you either keep it super high level because so, development practices, right? Like everyone knows when you're talking about software, waterfall sucks because you don't know what you don't know until you know that you don't know it, right? That's why Agile, Scrum, etc. Have been so popular. Even though everybody does it their own ways, it's just kind of a way to do things, right? So a roadmap is generally a feature you tend to see in waterfall, but like you can still see it in Agile, Scrum, or whatever, right? But like you'll never see me say that this is on the roadmap at this time because, or like this thing will be delivered by this time when it comes to Pidgin, because every time I try to do anything in Pidgin, it takes 4 times as long as it should, right? So like we were describing earlier with like the menu stuff in GTK, converting the menus to G menu and all that, getting all the static stuff, super easy. Did it in a night. All the dynamic stuff, months later, still trying to figure out the best way to do it, right? And that becomes one of the problems when it comes to a roadmap. But so the big things are there's a lot of stuff that's partially done in Pidgin 3 right now that's not 100% yet, right? So like the big things for Pidgin 3 right now, or so in my head, I don't have this written down anywhere, but in my head, for Pidgin 3.0.0 to be released, right? The final release of 3.0.0, we have to have voice and video. Have to. Now, it doesn't have to be implemented in every protocol plugin, but we have to have a working model that works across all platforms. That is, it is 2022. I am talking to you live via voice and video. There is no excuse for Pidgin 3 to not have full-blown voice and video support. right? Just that simple. On top of that, there are features like pasting images that I use every day that I miss in Pidgin. That has to be there, right? That has to be in 3.0. We need to have message editing, messages, responses, so on and so forth. All that needs to be there. A lot of the stuff dealing with messages depends on the history API that a Summer of Code student wrote for us last year. Now he wrote a basic implementation of it, not quite a proof of concept, but a first step, right? That's going to grow and get a lot more complicated, but that's necessary to go forward in the future. One of the other big things for Pidgin 3, which will make a lot of security people happy, is we no longer store passwords. We just don't. Because number one, I'm not a cryptographer. Nobody on the team is a cryptographer. We're going to mess up if we try. In the past, the Pidgin 3 branch has had an internal keyring that was using, I can't think of the algorithm. What is it? PKBDF or something. And it was, you could configure the iteration, stuff like that. We're just not doing that, right? So Pidgin 3, we rewrote the entire keyring API to become the credential providers and credential manager API, or the credential API, which is consists of a credential manager and credential provider. By default, right now we ship with credential providers for libsecret, so that covers GNOME and I think, so that covers GNOME and anybody else that uses libsecret. Then we also provide a credential provider for Kwallet, for KDE. We also provide the WinCred, whatever. We have a provider for WinCred, the Windows Credential API. That was added in like Windows 7 or 8 or something. I don't remember. It's been around a long time, just you don't see it anywhere. And then we also have a credential provider for macOS keychain access, right? So for our reasoning, we don't give a shit. We are not storing your passwords. We'll use a password manager and we'll go from there. And those are pluggable too, right? So if you want to use Bitwarden or 1Password or something like that, somebody can write a plugin. You can do that. By default, we provide the ones I just mentioned, right? WinCred, Apple Keychain Access, Kwallet, and libsecret. Those would be the ones we provide. Maybe we add others in the future. We'll see. So that stuff's all done. That all works. There's a couple bugs around that right now. The main issue is if something has an optional password, right? Like IRC has optional passwords. Those don't work right. You can't actually set a password for those because the way we implemented it kind of forgot about optional passwords. The intent there is to add a field to protocols to say that they have an optional password, and then in the UI we can display a checkbox that says require password or something. And then that'll fire off the credential API to ask you for your password during your login process so that it can store it in the credential and go from there. But so like aside from that, we have, so you might have heard me mention earlier about Talkatoo. Talkatoo was started as its life as a sub-library, and it may remain a sub-library. It may be just get migrated into Pidgin. But one of the bigger issues with Pidgin, with Pidgin 1, or Pidgin 2, and even Pidgin 3 up until we wrote Talkatoo was our input widget and our history widget. We're a pain to work with. Let's go with that, right? So we got into a scenario where in Pidgin 3 at one point we replaced the GTK IM HTML, that's what the widget was called, with a WebKit web view. Except WebKit version 1 got deprecated and removed from Linux distributions, which meant people couldn't compile Pidgin 3 anymore. So we created Talkatoo, which was basically a from-scratch rewrite of GTK IM HTML, which grew into a lot of helper widgets for chat clients with the intent of being able to be by other clients. It doesn't seem like we're going to get a lot of people interested in using them in other clients. The idea was that, we can get additional help building the widgets, blah, 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 blah. But so like those widgets had to be redesigned and rebuilt so that we can get stuff like displaying images properly in the history widget, accepting images being pasted into the input widget, and drag and dropping of files and all that, right? We wanted a common place to put all that, and that's what Talkatoo is. Again, trying to implement that in Pidgin 2, you'll see that there's plugins for it. If you look at the code, you're like, I have no idea what's going on, and this looks really hacky. Because it is, right? So we rewrote it with the mindset of, let's support modern protocol or modern the features, right? And that way the code's not nearly as gnarly and it's easier to deal with, easier to maintain. So that's the kind of where we're going with that. So like the roadmap is always changing, it's always moving. Um, but the big things are voice and video has to work, images have to work. I would love to get open graph previews in, but there's a privacy concern with that we don't know how to solve yet. But we already have, so like our message objects now have attachments and stuff like that. So after 3.0, a plugin could come in and add it, or we can add it afterwards, right? There's not a big deal. The plumbing will be there for it is the key thing, right? Aside from that, I don't know the timeline for it, but we're probably going to rewrite the IRC and XMPP protocol plugins from scratch. And I know everyone's like, oh, well, you shouldn't rewrite. Both of these things are over 20 years old, and both of those protocols have changed a lot in those 20 years. And as we've learned with trying to do this in-place update of Pidgin 3, or just this in-place update of libpurple and even Pidgin itself, right, is it takes a really, really, really long time to iteratively rewrite a program, right? And like, so like for the GTK4 port, right? So like if we just instead started from scratch with Pidgin, with moving Pidgin to GTK4, and we didn't care about the old widgets, we probably would have been done by now. Like if we did this we started, not necessarily if we started at the same time when we started the GTK4 port, but like if we just like kind of threw the UI away and started over, like, I don't know, I don't think it would take us more than 6 months. I might be, overly optimistic, but the problem is like, all right, well, how's one of the reasons I'm saying that though is as we're even converting our old stuff to just make it easier to port to GTK4, we're dropping features left and right, because the additional complexity of keeping those features right now adds an incredible amount of time to how long it takes to convert stuff, right? So a good example of this is I currently have a pull request open for converting the status editor. So like if you go to the status selector widget in the bottom of the body list in Pidgin 2 and you click new status, that window that pops up is the status editor. Pidgin 3, we added it to the menu at the top. I don't know why it wasn't there before, but just now. And that allows you to create a status where you select, give it a name, select the primitive type, give a message, and then you can select that other accounts have a different status when you select that one. Okay, that's a super complicated feature, the substatuses there. And because we're not sure if the substatuses are going to make it to the future, right? Because we want to look at redoing the status API, but we've already bitten off so much, it's just like, we'll see, right? But the complexity of adding the additional substatus editor right now was just like, we don't really need it right now, right? Like, so the substatuses exist primarily because back in the day, people would have one computer, and during work hours, they'd want to be connected to their work accounts, and on not work hours, they want to be connected to their personal accounts, right? They don't want to have that overlap, right? So they would have an account, they would have a status that says work and one that says home or something like that, right? And then when they go to work, or when they're on the work one, their home accounts go offline or something, right? And then when they go home, their work accounts go offline, their home accounts come online. The thing is, in 2022, everybody's connected to everything all the time, right? So that's the first thing of like, well, this doesn't really matter, right? But like whether or not that feature is going to stay, I don't know, right? It feels like we don't necessarily need it, but we'll see. And that's why, like, so when we rebuilt the status editor, we just skipped that feature because it's like, its feature is questionable. I'm not going to waste my time doing all this additional complexity to get us to GTK4 when we don't know if we're going to keep the feature, right? And that's one of the things we're like trying to roadmap that stuff. I don't know, right? We can sit here and spend all that time trying to figure it out, but who knows? So, all right, I think I've ranted on that one, or not ranted, but riffed on that one for quite a while. All right, next question. What is the state of the Facebook Messenger plugin that has been non-functional for a while now? Last I knew, it wasn't non-functional. It was just very hobbled. So the Facebook protocol plugin for Pidgin 2 has been maintained out of tree, right? So it's not something I maintain. It's not something the project maintains. I've offered to do some fixes and stuff, except I just keep getting busy and I can't find the time to work on it. It's also why I'm not maintaining it, right? The Facebook protocol plugin was originally written by James Culver, summer of code 2014, 2015, I don't remember. And he ended up going to work for Facebook, so he had to hand off the protocol plugin. Protocol plugin got picked up by DX and basically just kept it running, right? But the way, so when James wrote it back, whenever was, he built it in the Pidgin 3 branch because that's the future, right? The problem is with Pidgin 3's development, constantly hitting roadblock after roadblock and just being stuck in development hell. They set it up so that the build system will actually clone the Pidgin 3 repository, extract out the Facebook protocol plugin, wrap a build system around it, patch the hell out of it to make it work for Pidgin 2, and then you have Pidgin 2. Or then you have Facebook for Pidgin 2. The problem with that, as you might guess, is that Rube Goldberg of a system, nobody wants to maintain, nobody wants to manage it. It's a pain in the butt. And that causes all sorts of other issues. I have offered to fix that problem, but if I'm going to do it, it's not going to be Git, right? And people don't like that, but nobody else wants to do it either. But I'm not going to do it if nobody's going to pick it up, right? Because it's just a waste of time for me. But like the main issues right now that I'm aware of are the two-factor authentication problem, or the two-factor problem, where I have a patch started for it that's not finished, where if it detects that you need two-factor auth, it just pops up a Pidgin or purple request dialog that says enter your 2FA token, then you enter it and it spits it in. I don't remember why I haven't opened a pull request for it or anything yet, but that's just where that's at. I know there's been some other bugs with like stuff now getting disconnected and stuff like that, but I haven't dug into it because again, I'm not the maintainer of it. But yeah, so like that's pretty much all I can talk about the state of the plugin. That plugin will probably get removed from our tree at some point. One of the things I didn't mention is earlier is with the official Pidgin 3 and Purple 3 repositories, we are probably going to remove every proprietary protocol plugin. It's not that we won't be maintaining them and we won't be providing them. It's that they will be out of our main tree. And that's for legal reasons. So we definitely have lost at least one contributor because their employer did not want to take the legal risk of allowing them to continue working on Pidgin because of that gray area code or legal gray area code while they were under their employment, right? So they worked there for about a year or whatever. And what happens when your hobby that you're doing you can't do anymore for a year? Find other hobbies, right? Can't blame them. And then that's it. That was the end of their contributions. And they haven't come back since they've switched jobs, which is fine, right? I understand people move, things change, whatever. It's fine. But just to like that problem exists because of stupid reasons, right? Again, talking about the Mason sub projects, right? What we can do is we can pull that protocol plugin in as a Mason sub project, right? And then we're just done. We don't have to care about it, right? It's not in our main source tree, so as long as that person only works on the main source tree, they're fine, right? And then we're good, right? So more to the point, when it comes to the proprietary protocol plugins, it makes a lot more sense for them to be out of tree than it does for them to be in tree. And I understand that. We'll touch on this too real quick, but like the thing about the proprietary protocol plugins is most of them aren't guaranteeing third-party connectivity, right? Maybe the DMA law from the EU, I can't remember what it stands for at the moment, will change that. That's a law that says, or that's one of their, it's a law that among other things says that big tech companies over X size. I haven't read the whole thing, so I don't know. I don't know the specifics. But big tech companies over X size who has chat protocols have to make them interoperable with other chat protocols, right? That's new, right? We haven't had that. We didn't have that with AIM. We didn't have it with Yahoo, MSN, um, uh, Discord doesn't have interoperability with other stuff like that, right? So one of the things that happens is because they don't have to be interoperable with others, because they don't necessarily even have to provide an API, they make changes that break shit, right? We see this with Facebook, right? Getting back to the last question, there's all sorts of stuff with Facebook where they just break shit, right? I mean, Facebook's motto is move fast and break things. Guess what? They break Messenger all the time. And people come in and like, oh, Messenger's down again. I'm like, give it an hour, right? That's my default response is give it an hour. It's still broken in an hour, let me know. Because usually they deploy something, they think it's good, it broke something, they fix it, everybody's happy then, right? Um, so the benefit of having the proprietary protocols in a separate repository is if they break something drastically, right? And like it's not like they broke something, it's like they changed something, right? Because this makes business sense for them. The thing is, doing a Pidgin release takes a lot of time. As you like, I spent 12 hours last night preparing the release that I'm going to finish after this after this presentation. Um, and that's not something you want when so like if a chat provider changes something and it's a trivial change, you don't want to have to wait for me to do an entire release when the protocol plugin can make the change release and then push an update and be done, right? Now, I understand having everything in the main program and the main repository coming with it is super convenient. I get that. I totally understand that, but it's not feasible from our point of view. What we're trying to do is we have a or we have an idea, and a very rudimentary proof of concept started of a plugin slash add-on store, right? So similar to the Chrome Web Store or the Firefox add-on store, we're building that out to be in Pidgin, right? So there was a summer code project that was unsuccessful last year, whose intent was to create a wizard for first run and creating new accounts. And one of the things that's supposed to eventually do is it's supposed to reach out to the add-on store to find additional protocol plugins, right? So like if you say, hey, I want to use MS Teams, or so you get a brand new Pidgin 3 install, right? You get it installed and you're like, I don't know what to do with this. All right, well, the wizard starts, it goes, hi, welcome to Pidgin, blah, blah, blah. What chat networks would you like to use? It'll give you a list and say, if you don't, or, and then you select other. And it's like, all right, well, please type the name. And then it can search the add-on store for protocol plugins of that name, match that name, and then give you those options, right? And then it can go and download them, run it in your system, blah, 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 blah. And then the distribution problem is gone, right? That is a very dumbed down thing with it, right? Because that means everybody that's making a third-party protocol plugin has to go ahead and provide binaries for these clients and all that. And I have ideas, I have solutions for all of that. This is one of the reasons where Convey comes in, stuff like that. We can touch base on Convey on a stream or something. We're not going to touch it on here. But all the stuff I've been doing over the past 6 years is to get us to that point, right? So this is another one of those things on the roadmap of how do we get there? Well, there's a way, it's just really far out and we need more help getting there. So yeah, so that's that. I'm sorry, I got way off track there. But yeah, so that's the Facebook stuff, right? All right, so we got one more question here, unless somebody wants to add one more. Again, if you want to ask a question, be sure to type !ask and then your question. Then we'll cover it. Otherwise, if this is the last one, we'll see from there. So LT asks, what happens to Pidgin 2 when Pidgin 3 gets mainline in 2028? Yeah. Are you going to be legacy logged or? So the thing is, we've been pretty hands off with Pidgin 2 for a long time, right? We do 1 or 2 releases a year. We end up getting stuck with support stuff. for Pigeon 2 quite a bit, but it's not a whole lot. The thing is, Pigeon 2 is, let's be honest, not nearly as popular as it used to be. Um, so I'm not super worried about people holding on to it forever. I understand people aren't going to like the new UI in Pigeon 3. Because they're just not going to, right? It's like that I think it's an XKCD where it's like, yeah, we converted everybody it's like some people flying around in the spaceship. They're like, yeah, we converted everybody to the new chat network except for that one guy who wants to use his IRC thing, right? There's going to be those users when it comes to Pigeon 2 versus Pigeon 3. And the thing is, if Pigeon 2 works for them, it works for them, right? They don't have to move, right? Um, and if people want to submit patches, we'll accept them for a while, but I'm not going to, like in 2030, if I'm still doing this, I'm not accepting, like, I'm not maintaining Pigeon 2 anymore, right? Like, we will hopefully be on Pigeon 10, and, it'll be knocking the socks off of everyone, right? And we'll see from there. But yeah, so, like, one of the things we did a while ago was we made sure Pigeon 2 and Pigeon 3 were installable side by side. So we understand that, when we first go to Pigeon 3, there's going to be bugs, right? There's going to be things that are deal breakers for you. Instead of you losing all your settings, all your setup and everything, you'll still have your Pigeon 2. It'll still be there. It'll still be fully intact. Pigeon 3, Pigeon 2, they're completely separate. And that's just the way it goes, right? And then, so if Pigeon 3 is not your thing, you can fall back to Pigeon 2. But, just like all software, at some point it's going to become unmaintained or somebody else can pick it up. We'll go from there. So, yeah. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, we're going to wrap it up then. So, this recording will be up on YouTube at some point tonight. I've got to download the VOD and edit out stuff, blah blah blah. It's minor editing, nothing major. But yeah, so that's the deal. Hope everybody had a good time. And remember, the next State of the Bird is tentatively scheduled for July 21st-ish. So yeah. All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming by today. And I messed up. And until next time.